Welcome to Political Fix. This is our video series. Today we are speaking with veteran court reporter Robert Patrick. Robert was in the courtroom in a historic day on Monday of this week when it came out that the prosecution was dropping its case against Governor Eric Greitens. He had been charged with felony invasion of privacy, but when the judge agreed with a defense motion to allow the defense to call the prosecutor as a witness, the prosecution made the decision to drop the charge. So, Robert, you were in the courtroom at the time. Tell us a little bit about how that news went down. I mean, it must have hit the assembled media and others there in the courtroom with force, given that it really marked the end of this particular case.
Right. It was really strange because up until that point, there was a break at 4 o'clock, or a little after 4 o'clock, and up until that point, it was, more of the same. They were picking jurors. They were in the low. I think they'd reached the low 40s at that point, and there's not a lot of excitement associated with jury selection. So, everybody's going along. Everybody's acting normal. 4 o'clock, Kim Gardner's chief trial assistant comes in, has a little whispered conference with one of Greitens' defense attorneys, Jim Martin. He talks to Jack Garvey, another defense attorney. Meanwhile, the judge, Rex Burleson, is sort of dismissing the last batch of jurors and sort of sends everybody off on a break. So a lot of people left the courtroom, including a lot of reporters. The prosecution team went back to talk to Burleson. There was some comings and goings, but about 4:30, they kind of motioned for the defense to come back. They were back there for a few minutes, and then the defense came out. They were all smiles, and there was, I think based on all of that activity and who was in the courtroom, and people were talking to the state troopers protecting Greitens, and people were talking to the sheriff, and there was something going on. But they came out all smiles, and at that point, it looked like it was something that was at least reasonably favorable to Greitens.
You've got a story that will be on stltoday.com, our website, soon, if it isn't already there, looking back at this case. I want to ask you about that. Sure. There were many problems that the prosecution faced, one in particular. Tell us a little bit about what kind of was at the heart of the problems that eventually led to this decision.
Well, it's interesting because when you're facing, Greitens had a very large number of lawyers with a lot of experience and sort of locally renowned for their abilities, and so I think everyone should have expected that they would have attacked every aspect of this case. And people say, well, that's good lawyering, like any lawyer should do that, but on a daily basis in the courtroom where most of this stuff happened, that's you don't attack everything. You attack the thing that has the best chance of actually making a difference or something. And so among those attacks, they focused on a former FBI agent by the name of William Don Tisby. And he was the lead investigator in the early stages of the case. At one point, one of the prosecutors said I think Gardner said he was hired to locate and interview a couple of witnesses. So he does that. He's later deposed, and at that point, the defense was raising some issues with his background. I mean, he was demoted and disciplined in the FBI because he was accused of bigamy. He got married to a woman while his first marriage wasn't over, and he told the internal FBI investigators that he thought that first marriage was over. They later concluded that he had lied, which normally would be grounds for termination, but since it wasn't about a case, he didn't lie about a case. They said, we'll keep you on, but we're going to drop your salary, we're going to drop your sort of grade level and things like that. So I mean, they were focusing early on this guy and kind of what's his relationship with Gardner, and he's under this kind of special contract where he reports only to her, and why didn't they use a police department? But they kind of hit the gold mine when he did a deposition, because in that deposition he made various assertions that the defense team would later say were lies. I didn't take notes when I was interviewing these witnesses, and I never take notes. I didn't do this, I didn't do that, and then by reviewing the tapes, the videotapes that turned up later, and sort of looking at some of these other things, they said, well, why is this guy saying stuff on in his deposition that's kind of demonstrably false by other information that we've been provided. And that sort of led to this kind of domino effect. They focus in on Tisby and they say, you know, he perjured himself, and Gardner sat next to him and allowed him to perjure himself. And then, you know, they want to redepose him, and the judge allows that. And in that, before that second deposition, he says, I'm not going to answer any questions on the grounds I may incriminate myself. So they can't call him to testify. Now, I mean, you know, there was a question about how much of this stuff they would have gotten into in the actual trial. And first, the judge would have to permit it. But if you can't talk to this guy about what happened during the investigation, and the only people that were present during some of these interviews was Tisby and Gardner, then the next step is to talk to Gardner. Now, you know, they also talked to some of the witnesses that he interviewed, because their concern or their claim or the allegation was that he had tainted the witnesses by steering their testimony. So they can't talk to Tisby. Their next target was the witnesses, and then they wanted to talk to Kim Gardner.
And how usual or unusual is it, Robert, for the head prosecutor, in this case the circuit attorney, to be called as a witness, or at least to be qualified to be called as a witness in a trial? Well,
Gardner's office called it unprecedented. I think it's pretty, and I think that's pretty accurate. You know, I think she took it sounds like she took a very hands-on role in this investigation, and that ended up carrying some risks, you know, because she ended up being a potential witness. And, you know, one of the defense filings said if this was the police department, then there would be a police officer and his or her partner, and if for some reason one of them couldn't testify, then the other one could, and you wouldn't be in that situation. So by choosing to have the case investigated in this way, it kind of set up this series of events that resulted in them wanting to either call her as a witness, or what the judge eventually settled on is that she would proffer, that essentially she'd give a deposition. You know, here are the questions that we want to ask her, and here are her answers, and then the judge at that point would decide whether or not she would be an actual witness in the trial.
But didn't get that far.
They didn't get that far. That she was supposed to do that proffer at 8:30 Monday morning, and then they kind of postponed it to 4 o'clock Monday, and so hence all of that activity that happened at 4, because that was kind of the deadline. He was going to you know, sort of send the jurors out. We were going to take a break, and assuming they were unsuccessful in appealing, assuming the prosecutors were unsuccessful in appealing his order to have her sit for a proffer, then she was going to sit. And I don't know whether that would have been in open court or not. But so, you know, she had the choice. Am I going to sit for this proffer? Am I going to, you know, answer questions under oath, which would, as they said, be unprecedented? Or will I dismiss the case and perhaps seek a special prosecutor or figure something else out?
Right. That takes us to our final question here, Robert. So in the aftermath of the actual decision to drop, Governor Greitens came out and said it was a great victory. He said he felt humbled, but that he said these were trumped up, untrue charges. The prosecution, however, said we are going to push forward. So tell us, how can the prosecution continue in this case, given that they've dropped the case?
Right. That's a little unclear right now. They could, I mean, one of the avenues would be they could file charges, and then almost definitely Greitens' lawyers would file for a special prosecutor to handle the case based on what they've alleged already. And then it would be up to Judge Burleson to appoint the special prosecutor. I think that Gardner could find a special prosecutor on her own to sort of carry that case forward. There are, you know, as what happened throughout this case, I think there'll be some real challenges from the defense about, you know, is it too late to file a case, you know? And certainly they claim that that any special prosecutor is going to be presented with the same evidence obstacles that Gardner's office was. You know, there is no picture, there's no evidence of any picture, so therefore how can you have a case?
Right. It would actually, as you have written at stltoday.com, it would actually then be a matter of the jury judging whether the woman at the center of this was telling the truth about the encounter or not. That's really what it would focus on, and perhaps will still focus on if the case moves forward.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us for Political Fix, stltoday.com. I'm Christopher Ave. I'm the political and national editor. And thank you very much, Robert, for joining us. Read his work at stltoday.com. Thank you very much for watching.